Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Rescue workers in Washington, D.C. have launched a massive search operation in the Potomac after an American Airlines flight and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided midair late Wednesday, with both aircrafts crashing into the river. So far, no survivors have been found. At least 30 bodies have been pulled from the river. American Airlines Flight 5342 had 60 passengers and 4 crew members on board and was en route to the D.C. area, Reagan National Airport, from Wichita, Kansas. Several passengers were members of U.S. figure skating who were heading home after a training camp and the Nationals. The Black Hawk helicopter had 3 soldiers on board conducting a training flight. An investigation is underway by the National Transportation Safety Board, aided by the Federal Aviation Administration. On social media, President Trump called the crash, quote, a bad situation that looks like it should have been prevented, unquote. Just 1 week prior to Wednesday's deadly crash, Trump fired the head of the Transportation Security Administration and all members of the Aviation Security Advisory Committee. The crash comes just days after the head of the Federal Aviation Administration, Mike Whitaker, stepped down. FAA administrators usually serve 5-year terms. Trump has not named a replacement. Whitaker announced his planned departure in December after Elon Musk repeatedly attacked him on social media, tweeting he needs to resign. The White House Wednesday rescinded a memo from the Office of Management and Budget that briefly froze trillions of dollars of federal grants and loans, even though the money had already been appropriated by Congress. The order set off panic and mass confusion across the federal bureaucracy, briefly disrupting funding for Medicaid, housing, and other public services Tuesday before a federal judge put a temporary hold on the plan. On Wednesday, a second federal judge, U.S. District Judge Jack McConnell in Rhode Island, signaled he, too, would block the Trump administration from withholding federal disbursements, writing, quote, I am very concerned about the irreparable harm which has clearly been put forth, he said. On Wednesday, Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt insisted the reversal was not a rescission of the federal funding freeze and said the White House would continue to seek ways to eliminate funding for what it called woke ideologies. President Trump has signed the Laken-Riley Act into law, which allows federal immigration authorities to indefinitely detain undocumented immigrants arrested for certain nonviolent crimes without due process. 46 Democrats from the House, 12 from the Senate, joined their Republican colleagues in voting in favor. At the signing ceremony for the first piece of legislation of a second term, President Trump announced plans to send, quote, the worst criminal aliens to Guantanamo Bay. The military was reportedly unaware of Trump's plan, which would require new infrastructure to house up to 30,000 people. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez said, quote, the U.S. government's decision to imprison migrants at the Guantanamo Naval Base in an enclave where it created torture and indefinite detention centers shows contempt for the human condition and international law, he said. Meanwhile, deportation flights to Latin America are continuing amidst Trump's escalating crackdown. Recently deported Guatemalans say the crackdown has targeted everyone in the immigrant community.
Trump said that he was only going to catch the criminals, but now the police are also collaborating with immigration. So if you are driving and there are 2 or 3 people in the car, they will get caught even if they are not criminals. They're taking everyone.
I left 2 children there, and now I'm here in Guatemala. I don't know how I can get them back. They took me away from my children. It's tough to live because I am a mother. I can't live without my children.
At least 4 U.S. military planes carrying deported people landed in Guatemala this week following Colombia's refusal to accept military deportation flights. Colombia instead sent its own aircraft to fly deportees home with dignity, they said. In more immigration news, Trump officials have rescinded the Biden administration's 18-month extension of TPS. That's temporary protected status for over 600,000 Venezuelans. The order means those affected only have protection under TPS until April and September of this year. The Senate has confirmed former Long Island Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin as head of the Environmental Protection Agency. 3 Democrats sided with Republicans in Wednesday's vote to confirm Zeldin: Arizona Senators Ruben Gallego and Mark Kelly and Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman. The youth climate action group Sunrise Movement condemns Zeldin's confirmation as a disaster for the planet and a win for fossil fuel executives, writing, quote, "He took $420,000 from big oil, pledged to undo climate protections, and has been all in with Trump, backing corporate polluters at the expense of working people," they said. Meanwhile, Democratic senators grilled Health and Human Services nominee RFK Jr. at his confirmation hearing Wednesday. We'll have more on the confirmation hearings for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. with Oregon Senator Ron Wyden. Also on Wednesday, senators advanced nominations of Pam Bondi for Attorney General and Kelly Loeffler to head the Small Business Administration. Meanwhile, Trump's nominee for Director of National Intelligence, former Hawaii Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, faces an uphill battle to confirmation when she appears before the Senate Intelligence Committee today. Fox News reports Gabbard does not currently have a majority of the votes needed, with half of the committee's Republicans still undecided. We'll also discuss Gabbard with Oregon Senator Ron Wyden. Israel scheduled to free 110 Palestinians, including 30 children, from its prisons after Hamas said it had released 3 Israelis and 5 Thai nationals held hostage in Gaza since October 7, 2023. The exchange took place as Trump's Middle East envoy, the former head of the Inauguration Committee, Steve Witkoff, arrived in Israel and became the first senior American official to enter Gaza in nearly 15 years. Witkoff toured the Israeli-occupied Netzarim corridor separating northern and southern Gaza, embedded among Israeli soldiers. On Wednesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he'd accepted President Trump's invitation to meet at the White House next Tuesday. Also Wednesday, Trump signed an executive order to deport non-citizen college students and other international visitors who take part in pro-Palestinian protests. Trump said in a statement accompanying the order, quote, "I will quickly cancel the student visas of all Hamas sympathizers on college campuses, which have been infested with radicalism like never before," Trump said. In Gaza, Israeli airstrikes have killed 2 Palestinians despite the ceasefire agreement. Separately, an Israeli civilian contractor working with Israel's military in Gaza was shot dead by Israeli soldiers, apparently after being mistaken for a Palestinian. In the occupied West Bank, an Israeli airstrike on the Palestinian town of Tamun late Wednesday killed 10 people and left several other Palestinians wounded. The attack came as Israel's army arrested 26 Palestinians in raids across the occupied West Bank. Separately, Israeli warplanes have fired 2 missiles at a building in Jenin refugee camp earlier today. On Wednesday, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said Israeli forces will remain in the Jenin refugee camp and will continue to occupy additional territory it recently seized in Syria's Golan Heights. This all comes as international staff working for the UN's Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, have been forced to leave their posts after Israel's ban on the agency came into effect earlier today. UNRWA spokesperson Jonathan Fowler said Israel's decision could trigger a collapse of humanitarian aid to Palestinians.
In East Jerusalem, we serve 70,000 patients who are at the sort of bottom of the economic ladder, the most vulnerable members of society, people who don't have access to affordable healthcare alternatives and use our free healthcare system. These people need us. They need these services. It's like a nightmare scenario, and it's also completely outlandish.
A federal judge in Manhattan has sentenced former New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez to 11 years in prison following his conviction on corruption charges. In July, jurors found Menendez guilty of bribery, wire fraud, extortion, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and acting as a foreign agent for Egypt. He's due to report to prison June 6. Menendez spoke to reporters following his sentencing Wednesday, stoking speculation he's seeking a pardon from President Trump.
Welcome to the Southern District of New York, the Wild West of political prosecutions. President Trump is right. This process is political and it's corrupted to the core. I hope President Trump cleans up the cesspool and restores the integrity to the system.
And the Justice Department is reportedly in talks with federal prosecutors in Manhattan about dropping corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Adams was indicted last year on 5 counts, including bribery, conspiracy, and campaign finance violations. A growing number of Adams' allies have also been indicted or resigned. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.